You are on HOA control freaks. I stayed calm and let her talk. Karen yelled that the tow receipt would be my proof of learning. She waved the pink slip in her hand like it was a diploma, like I had just graduated from her personal school of compliance. The tire clamp sat open on the pavement between us, its bright yellow jaws spread wide and waiting. Rain misted down, not hard enough to make us move, just enough to make everything slippery and cold. You keep stalling and I keep escalating, she said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. I kept my hands in my pockets and my face blank. My name is Dan. I am an appliance repair tech who is always getting called mid-shift, and right now I was supposed to be halfway across Frederick fixing a busted ice maker. Instead, I was standing in the driveway of my new rental in Fairview Landing, staring at Colleen Robinson, Rules Enforcement Chair for the Fairview Landing Association, who had just called a tow truck on my work van for a violation I did not commit. She tapped the clipboard in the clear plastic sleeve against her thigh. The sleeve was spotless, the kind of thing someone buys when they want their paperwork to look official. Her blonde hair was tucked behind her ears, straight and precise, and her white sun hat dripped a thin line of water off the brim. Her blue windbreaker rustled as she shifted her weight. I decide what counts as compliant, not you, she said. That is the rule. You park overnight without a permit, you get towed. You already got the warning. Now you get the consequence. I did not park overnight, I said. I got here at 6 this morning to grab tools. I have been here 20 minutes. She smiled, thin and cold. The chalk marks on your tire say otherwise. I checked at midnight. Same position. That is how we know. The lie was so clean it almost impressed me. I glanced past her to the neighbor across the street, a middle-aged guy in cargo shorts holding a garden hose. He had paused mid-spray, water pooling on the grass at his feet, his mouth slightly open as he watched the show. I gave him a tiny nod. He did not nod back, but he did not look away either. Colleen turned and waved toward the street. A white tow truck idled at the curb, amber lights flashing lazily in the drizzle. The driver leaned against the door, arms crossed, waiting for the signal. This is what happens when you ignore the process, Colleen said. You had your chance to comply. Now it is too late. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the camera app. I angled it so the tire clamp, the tow truck, and Colleen were all in frame. What are you doing? She snapped. Documenting, I said. Her face flushed. You think that is going to help you? Go ahead. Make it public. I love watching people get embarrassed. I kept recording. My work van sat in the driveway behind me, parked legally on my own property, no fire lane, no guest spot, no permit required. The chalk marks she mentioned were real. I had noticed them when I pulled in. Fresh white lines on the front tire, the kind tow companies use to prove a car has not moved. The kind someone could draw at any time and claim it proved anything. The management office closes in 2 hours, I said. I am going to file a dispute before they lock the doors. You can tow me if you want, but I am going to make sure every board member knows exactly what you did and why. Colleen stepped closer, close enough that I could see the raindrops clinging to her windbreaker. Her voice dropped, quieter, but sharper. You are rebuilding after a move. You cannot take more disruption. I know that. So here is what you are going to do. You are going to pay the tow release fee. You are going to apologize for wasting my time, and you are going to get a guest permit for that van by end of day tomorrow. Or the next time I do not call the tow truck. I call code enforcement, and I start pulling permits on every repair you have ever done in that unit. I stopped recording and pocketed the phone. The neighbor with the hose finally moved, stepping forward off his lawn and onto the sidewalk. He did not say anything, but he was close enough now that Colleen glanced over her shoulder. Everything okay over there? He called. Fine, Colleen said without looking at him. HOA business. The guy did not move. He just stood there, hose still running, water soaking into the pavement around his feet. I turned back to Colleen. I am not paying a release fee for a tow that has not happened yet, and I am not apologizing for parking legally on my own driveway. If you want to escalate, go ahead. I will see you at the next board meeting. Her smile came back, colder than before. You were not invited to the next board meeting. That is members only. And last I checked, you are a renter. Renters do not get a vote. She turned and waved to the tow driver. He pushed off the door and climbed into the cab. The truck rumbled forward, backing into position at the edge of my driveway. I pulled my keys from my pocket and walked past Colleen to the van. She did not try to stop me. I climbed in, started the engine, and backed out onto the street before the tow truck could get the wheel lift in position. The driver hit the brakes and leaned out the window, shouting something I could not hear over the rain and the engine. Colleen stood in the driveway, clipboard at her side, rain soaking into her windbreaker. Her face was red, her mouth a tight line. I rolled down the window. "I will see you at the management office," I said. Then I drove. The Fairview Landing Association management office was a squat brick building off Monocacy Boulevard, wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax prep franchise. The parking lot was half empty, and the front windows were dark except for a single overhead light in the reception area. I pulled into a spot near the door and checked the time. 1 hour and 40 minutes until they closed. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, and the folder I kept in the van for exactly this kind of situation. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. A woman in her 50s sat behind the front desk, typing slowly on a desktop computer. She glanced up when I walked in, her expression neutral. "Can I help you?" she said. "I need to file a parking dispute," I said. "For a tow that was just attempted on my property." She reached under the desk and pulled out a single-page form, sliding it across the counter. "Fill this out. Include your address, the date and time of the incident, and a brief description. You can submit it here or upload it to the resident portal." I took the form and a pen from the cup on the counter. The form was simple, almost too simple. Name, address, date, time, description, signature. No space for attachments, no space for evidence. "Can I attach documentation?" I asked. "You can try uploading it to the portal," she said. "But the system has been having issues lately. If the upload fails, you will need to mail physical copies to the board secretary." Of course it has issues, I thought. I filled out the form quickly, keeping my handwriting clear. Under description I wrote, "Rules Enforcement Chair Colleen Robinson falsely claimed I parked overnight and ordered a tow on my private driveway. Chalk marks were placed without my knowledge. I have video evidence and a witness." I signed and dated it, then slid it back across the counter. She stamped it with a red date stamp and dropped it into a plastic tray labeled "Disputes." "You will hear back within 30 days, she said. 30 days, I said. "That is the standard review period." "Unless it is an emergency?" "This feels like an emergency." She gave me a look that said she had heard that before. "You can request an expedited review by emailing the board directly. I cannot guarantee they will respond." I thanked her and walked out. The rain had picked up, drumming hard against the roof of the van. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone. I opened the resident portal app, logged in, and tried to upload the video I had just recorded. The progress bar filled halfway, then froze. I waited. It timed out. I tried again. Same result. I tried a third time. The app crashed. I restarted it and tried one more time. The upload started, crept forward, and then failed again. I checked the time. The office would close in an hour and 15 minutes. If I wanted to deliver physical copies in person, I needed to move fast. I drove home, printed the video screenshots on my cheap inkjet, and grabbed the folder I had been building since the first week I moved in. Inside were copies of every email I had sent to the HOA, every notice I had received, every rule and policy document I had downloaded from the portal, and a printed log of every interaction I had had with Colleen. I added the new screenshots, clipped everything together, and drove back. The office was darker now. The woman at the desk was packing up her bag. I walked in and dropped the folder on the counter. "Physical copies," I said. "For the dispute I filed 20 minutes ago." She opened the folder, flipped through the first few pages, and closed it again. "I will attach this to your file. You will still need to wait for the review period." "Can I get a receipt?" I asked. She pulled a blank sheet of paper from the printer, wrote "Received" and the date, and signed her name at the bottom. She handed it to me. I folded it and put it in my pocket. When I got back to the van, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I did not recognize. This is your final courtesy notice. Guest vehicles must display valid permits at all times. Failure to comply will result in immediate towing and a $250 administrative fee. Fairview Landing Association. I stared at the message. My work van was not a guest vehicle. I lived here. The van was registered to my name, parked on my driveway, and I had never been told I needed a permit for it. I took a screenshot and added it to the evidence folder on my phone. Another text arrived 10 seconds later. A hearing has been scheduled to review your parking violations. Date, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Location, Community Center. Attendance is mandatory. Failure to attend will result in automatic fines and enforcement action. I read it twice. I had not been told about any violations. I had not been given a chance to respond. And now I had less than 24 hours to prepare for a hearing I did not know existed until this moment. I called the management office. It went to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I texted back to the unknown number. I was never notified of any violations or hearing. I need copies of all notices sent to me. No response. I drove home in silence, the rain hammering the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. My mind ran through every conversation I had had with Colleen, every notice I had seen taped to doors or posted in the lobby, every rule and policy line I had read in the handbook. Nothing about mandatory hearings. Nothing about automatic enforcement for missed hearings. Nothing about permits for resident vehicles. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw it. A bright yellow tire clamp, lying open on the pavement near the garage door. The same one Colleen had been standing over earlier. Someone had left it there while I was gone. A threat. A promise. A message that said I was next. I picked it up. It was heavy, industrial, the kind of thing used to immobilize cars in tow yards and parking enforcement zones. The paint was scuffed, the metal cold and slick with rain. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. My phone buzzed again. Another text, same unknown number. You missed your chance to comply quietly. Now it is public. See you tomorrow. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I logged into the HOA group chat, a private forum for residents that I had been added to when I first moved in. I scrolled through the last few days of messages. Most of it was routine, reminders about trash pickup, complaints about landscaping, requests for contractor recommendations. Then I saw it. A thread from 3 days ago, started by Colleen. Colleen, FYI, new renter at 428 Maple, is parking a commercial vehicle overnight. I have documented multiple violations. Tow authorized if he does not comply by end of week. Someone replied, "Does he know?" Colleen, notice was delivered. If he claims he did not get it, that is on him. Another reply, "What if he fights it?" Colleen, then we escalate. I have the vendor on standby. This is not negotiable. I took screenshots of the entire thread. Then I kept scrolling. More messages from Colleen, more talk of violations and enforcement and towing. And then I found the one that made my chest tighten. A message from 2 weeks ago, before I had even moved in. Colleen, new tenant moving into 428. Keep an eye on parking. Last tenant was a problem. Let us make sure this one gets the message early. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. This was not about parking. This was about control. This was about making sure I knew my place from day one. Colleen had decided I was a problem before I had even unpacked my first box. I saved the screenshots and added them to the evidence folder. Then I called the one person I knew who might be able to help. His name was Greg. He lived 2 houses down, worked from home doing something in finance, and had been the one to pause with the garden hose earlier. I did not know him well, but he had waved a few times when I pulled in, and once he had stopped to ask if I needed help carrying in a fridge. When he answered, I heard a TV in the background and the faint sound of kids arguing. "Hey, Dan," he said. "What is up?" "I need a favor," I said. "You saw what happened this afternoon. with Colleen and the tow truck. Yeah, that was wild. She really called a tow on you? She tried. I got out before they could hook me. But she is escalating. I just got a text about a hearing tomorrow that I was never told about, and someone left a tire clamp on my driveway while I was gone. A pause. That is messed up. What do you need from me? A witness statement. And if you have any doorbell footage from the last week or so, I need that too. Especially anything with Colleen near my property. Another pause, longer this time. Let me check. I have a Ring camera on the front porch. I will pull the last 2 weeks and send you anything that looks relevant. Thank you, I said. I mean it. No problem. Colleen has been pulling this stuff for years. Someone needs to push back. Good luck tomorrow. He hung up. I sat at the table and waited. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A link to a shared video file. I opened it. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped 2 nights ago at 11:47 p.m. It showed Colleen walking up my driveway, stopping next to my van, crouching down by the front tire. She pulled something from her pocket, a piece of chalk, and drew a thick white line on the rubber. Then she stood, looked around, and walked back to the street. She paused at the curb, made a note on her clipboard, and disappeared out of frame. I watched it 3 more times. The timestamp was clear, the motion was deliberate, the intent was undeniable. Colleen had not been checking my van, she had been framing it. I saved the video and added it to the evidence folder. Then I opened a new document and started writing. I outlined every interaction, every notice, every threat, every lie. I included timestamps, screenshots, video links, and witness contact information. I formatted it cleanly, printed 2 copies, and put them in a 3-ring binder. On the cover I wrote, Parking Dispute Evidence, Nienas, Dan Fletcher, 428 Maple Drive. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. The rain had stopped. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the walls settling. I set the binder on the counter next to the tire clamp and went to bed. I did not sleep much. The next morning I got up early, showered, put on clean clothes, and made coffee. I checked my phone. No new messages. I checked the group chat. No new posts. I checked the resident portal. Still broken. At 5:30 I grabbed the binder, the tire clamp, and my keys. The community center was a 10-minute drive, a low brick building with a gravel parking lot and a faded sign out front. When I pulled in, there were already 6 cars in the lot. I recognized Colleen's white sedan near the front door. Inside, the air was stale and warm. A hallway led to a large meeting room with folding chairs arranged in rows and a long table at the front. 5 people sat at the table, 3 board members I vaguely recognized, a man in a suit I assumed was the HOA attorney, and Colleen. She had a fresh printout in front of her, stapled and highlighted. She saw me walk in, and her expression did not change. I took a seat in the second row. A few other residents trickled in and sat near the back, whispering to each other. At exactly 6 o'clock, the board president, a gray-haired man in a polo shirt, tapped the table. We are here to review a parking enforcement matter involving the resident at 428 Maple Drive. Miss Robinson, you filed the complaint. Please summarize. Colleen stood and walked to the front of the room. She held the clipboard in the clear plastic sleeve like a shield. Thank you. The resident Dan Fletcher has repeatedly parked a commercial vehicle overnight in violation of Section 4.7 of the parking policy. I documented the violation on multiple occasions using chalk test markings, which confirmed the vehicle did not move for over 12 hours. I issued a courtesy warning via text and posted a notice on the resident portal. Mr. Fletcher ignored both. Yesterday I authorized a tow under Section 4.9, enforcement escalation. He evaded the tow by moving the vehicle before the operator could secure it. I am requesting a formal fine of $250 and a compliance order requiring Mr. Fletcher to obtain a valid guest parking permit within 48 hours or face additional enforcement action. She sat down. The board president looked at me. Mr. Fletcher, you have 5 minutes to respond. I stood and walked to the front. I set the binder on the table and opened it to the first page. Everything Miss Robinson just said is false. I did not park overnight. I did not receive a warning on the portal, because the upload system has been broken for weeks. I did not ignore a courtesy text, because the only texts I received were sent after the TOW was already called. And the chalk marks she claims prove a violation were placed on my tire by Miss Robinson herself at 11:47 p.m. 2 nights ago. I have doorbell footage from a neighbor that shows her doing it. I turned the binder to face the board and pointed to the printed screenshot from the video. The board president leaned forward. The attorney picked up the binder and flipped through the pages. Colleen stood. That is absurd. I conduct routine compliance checks. Chalk marking is standard procedure. I looked at her. You placed chalk marks on a vehicle that was not parked illegally, at midnight, on private property, without notifying the resident. That is not a compliance check. That is fabrication of evidence. The attorney set the binder down and looked at Colleen. Miss Robinson, can you provide documentation of the original notice you claim was sent? Colleen hesitated. It was posted to the portal. The portal has been down, I said. I have tried to upload dispute documents 3 times in the last 24 hours. Every attempt failed. The management office confirmed the system is having issues. The attorney made a note. Mr. Fletcher, do you have the video evidence you mentioned? I pulled out my phone, opened the saved video, and handed it across the table. The attorney watched it twice. Then he handed the phone to the board president. The president watched it once and set the phone down. Miss Robinson, he said, did you place chalk marks on Mr. Fletcher's vehicle at the time shown in this video? Colleen did not answer right away. Her face was red. Her hands gripped the clipboard so hard the plastic sleeve bent. I was conducting a compliance check, she said finally. That is within my authority as Rules Enforcement Chair. The attorney cleared his throat. Actually, it is not. Chalk marking on private property without prior notice is not covered under the enforcement authority granted to committee chairs. And if Mr. Fletcher can demonstrate that the vehicle was not parked in violation at the time you marked it, then this becomes a liability issue for the association. Colleen looked at him. What are you saying? I am saying that you may have exceeded your authority, and if Mr. Fletcher chooses to pursue this further, the association could be held liable for harassment and wrongful enforcement. The room went silent. I could hear someone shifting in a chair behind me. The board president rubbed his temple. Mr. Fletcher, do you have any additional evidence? I do, I said. I pulled a second set of pages from the binder. These are screenshots from the HOA group chat. 3 days before the tow attempt, Miss Robinson posted that she had authorized enforcement action against me. She also stated that she had delivered a notice to me, which I never received. And 2 weeks before I moved in, she posted that the new tenant at my address should be watched closely for parking issues, before I had even parked a vehicle there. I slid the pages across the table. The attorney picked them up and read them slowly. His expression did not change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Miss Robinson, the attorney said, did you coordinate with a tow vendor prior to completing the standard notice and review process? Colleen did not answer. Miss Robinson, the board president said, answer the question. I have a working relationship with a local tow company, she said. They respond quickly when we need enforcement support. The attorney set the pages down. That is not an answer. Did you authorize a tow before Mr. Fletcher had been given a formal notice and an opportunity to cure the alleged violation? Yes, Colleen said, but he was in violation. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss another HOA drama breakdown. The attorney leaned back in his chair. Miss Robinson, you do not have the authority to authorize towing without board approval, and you do not have the authority to bypass the required notice and cure period. You also do not have the authority to place enforcement markers on private property without consent. All 3 actions expose the association to significant liability. Colleen stood. I was enforcing the rules. You were violating the rules, the attorney said, and in doing so, you created a situation where this association is now at risk of a harassment claim, a wrongful towing claim, and possibly a civil suit. The board president looked at me. "Mr. Fletcher, what is it you want here?" "I want the fine dropped," I said. "I want a written apology from Miss Robinson. I want the tow authorization reversed and removed from my record. And I want a formal policy change that requires board approval for any towing action and mandates a notice and cure period before enforcement." The board president nodded slowly. "I think we can do that." Colleen slammed the clipboard onto the table. "You are letting him dictate policy?" The attorney cut her off. "Miss Robinson, if you do not stop talking right now, I am going to recommend that the board remove you from the Rules Enforcement Committee and open an internal investigation into your conduct. Do you understand me?" Colleen stared at him. Then she grabbed her clipboard and walked out of the room. The door slammed behind her. The board president rubbed his face. "Mr. Fletcher, I apologize. This should not have happened. We will draft the policy change and send it to you for review. The fine is dropped as of right now, and the tow authorization is expunged. You will receive a written confirmation by end of week." I nodded. "Thank you." I packed up the binder and walked out. A few residents stopped me in the hallway to shake my hand. Greg was waiting by the door. "That was insane," he said. "I cannot believe she actually admitted it." "I did not expect her to," I said, "but I am glad she did." "You still have the tire clamp?" "I do." "Keep it. Evidence." I drove home in silence, the adrenaline slowly draining out of my chest. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a notice taped to my front door. My stomach dropped. I parked, got out, and walked over. It was not from Colleen. It was from the management office. Notice of policy violation, unapproved guest parking. Your guest vehicle has been parked in violation of Section 4.7 for over 48 hours. You have 24 hours to remove the vehicle or obtain a valid guest permit. Failure to comply will result in immediate towing and a $250 administrative fee. I tore the notice off the door and read it again. The date was from 2 days ago. Before the hearing, before the apology, before the policy change. Colleen had filed it before she lost. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the notice. Then I called the management office. It went to voicemail. I called the board president. He answered on the second ring. "Dan," he said, "what is wrong?" "I just found a notice on my door claiming I have a guest parking violation. It is dated 2 days ago. I need this canceled immediately." He sighed. "Send me a picture. I will handle it." I sent the picture and hung up. Then I went inside, poured a drink, and sat down at the kitchen table. The tire clamp sat on the counter like a trophy. My phone buzzed. A text from the board president. "Notice canceled. Colleen filed it yesterday before the hearing. She is off the committee as of tonight. Again, I am sorry." I stared at the text. It was not enough. An apology was not going to stop Colleen from finding another way to come at me. I needed something bigger, something that would force the board to take action and keep her away from me permanently. I opened my laptop and logged into the group chat. I scrolled through months of messages looking for anything that might give me leverage. I found it an hour later. A thread from 6 months ago. Colleen had posted a complaint about a resident who had filed a dispute over a landscaping fine. The complaint included the resident's full name, address, and copies of private correspondence between the resident and the management office. Another board member had replied asking Colleen to remove the post because it violated the privacy policy. Colleen had refused. "Colleen, if people do not want their business aired out, they should follow the rules. This is a transparency issue." The thread had been deleted a day later, but I had a screenshot. I kept digging. More threads. More privacy violations. More threats. More talk of towing and fines and enforcement escalation. I found a message from 4 months ago where Colleen bragged about getting a resident evicted for repeated violations. I found another message from 2 months ago where she joked about having a tow vendor on speed dial. I compiled everything into a second binder. I labeled it Evidence of Pattern and Practice. Then I sent an email to the board president and the HOA attorney with the subject line Formal Complaint, Colleen Robinson, rules enforcement misconduct. In the email, I outlined every violation I had found. Privacy breaches, unauthorized enforcement actions, coordination with tow vendors without board approval, harassment of residents, fabrication of violations. I attached the screenshots, the video, the witness statement from Greg, and the receipts from the management office showing my failed upload attempts. I hit send at 2 in the morning and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls and 15 unread emails. The board president had forwarded my complaint to the entire board and the management company. The attorney had replied asking for a meeting. 3 residents had emailed me privately thanking me for speaking up and offering their own stories of harassment by Colleen. One resident included doorbell footage of Colleen placing a violation notice on his door at midnight without knocking. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for that evening. I was invited. Colleen was not. At 6 o'clock, I walked into the community center with the second binder. The board was already seated. The attorney was there. The management company sent a representative. The room was packed with residents. The board president started. We are here to address the formal complaint filed by Dan Fletcher regarding conduct by former Rules Enforcement Chair Colleen Robinson. I want to be clear. This is not a hearing to determine Mr. Fletcher's guilt or innocence. That matter is closed. This is a review of Ms. Robinson's conduct and whether it violated association policy and exposed the association to legal liability. The attorney stood. I have reviewed the evidence submitted by Mr. Fletcher. I have also reviewed statements from 3 additional residents who came forward after the complaint was filed. My conclusion is that Ms. Robinson engaged in a pattern of conduct that violated multiple association policies, exceeded her authority as Rules Enforcement Chair, and created significant legal risk for the association. I recommend immediate removal from all committee assignments, a formal written reprimand, and a referral to the board for potential membership sanctions. One of the board members raised a hand. What about the tow vendor relationship? The attorney nodded. I subpoenaed call logs from the vendor Ms. Robinson used. Over the last 6 months, she authorized 11 towing actions. Of those 11, only 3 had prior board approval. The other 8 were initiated by Ms. Robinson directly, bypassing the required notice and cure process. In 2 cases, the vehicles towed were parked legally on private property and should never have been towed at all. The room erupted. Residents shouted questions. Someone demanded a refund. Someone else called for Colleen to be banned from the community center. The board president banged the table. "Order," he said. "We will address refunds and restitution separately. Right now, we need to vote on the attorney's recommendation." The vote was unanimous. Colleen was removed from all committees, barred from future leadership positions, and given a formal written reprimand. The board also voted to implement the policy changes I had requested: mandatory board approval for all towing actions, a 72-hour notice and cure period before enforcement, and a ban on chalk marking without prior written notice. The attorney added one more thing. Effective immediately, all rules enforcement actions must be documented and submitted to the management company for review before any enforcement action is taken. No committee chair or board member has the authority to act unilaterally. The meeting ended. I walked out into the parking lot and saw Colleen standing next to her car. She did not look at me. She got in, started the engine, and drove away. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You think you won, but you just made it worse. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." I took a screenshot and forwarded it to the board president and the attorney. The attorney called me 10 minutes later. "File a police report," he said. "This is harassment, and if it continues, we will pursue a restraining order." I went to the police station and filed a report. The officer took my statement, reviewed the text message, and gave me an incident number. He said they would follow up if there were any additional incidents. There were. The next morning, I woke up to find orange traffic cones blocking my driveway, 6 of them, arranged in a tight line across the entrance. I moved them aside and drove to work. When I came home that evening, they were back. I moved them again. The next morning, they were back again. I set up my own doorbell camera and pointed it at the driveway. That night at 11:30 p.m., Colleen pulled up in her white sedan, got out with a bag of cones, and placed them one by one across my driveway. She did not try to hide. She looked directly at the camera, smiled, and waved. I saved the video and sent it to the attorney. He called me the next morning. "We are filing for a temporary restraining order," he said. "This is beyond HOA enforcement. This is targeted harassment. I will have the paperwork ready by end of day. In the meantime, do not engage with her. Do not move the cones. Let the police handle it." I called the police again. They sent an officer to take another report. He watched the video, made notes, and said they would contact Colleen. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Colleen. "You are really going to call the cops on me for traffic cones," she said. "That is pathetic." I hung up. She called again. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. "You are making this personal. I was just doing my job. But if you want to keep escalating, fine. I can escalate too." I saved the voicemail and sent it to the attorney. He filed for the restraining order that afternoon. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the management company sent out an email to all residents. Effective immediately, all rules enforcement actions are suspended pending a full audit of committee procedures. Any resident who believes they were subjected to improper enforcement actions in the last 12 months is encouraged to contact the management office to request a review. Within 24 hours, 17 residents filed complaints. The management company hired an outside auditor. The board called another emergency meeting. At the meeting, the auditor presented his findings. Colleen had filed over 40 enforcement actions in the last year. Of those 40, 22 were later found to be invalid or improperly documented. 8 resulted in towing actions that should never have been authorized. 3 involved fabricated evidence. The auditor recommended a full refund of all fees collected under Colleen's enforcement actions and a formal apology to every affected resident. The board voted to accept the recommendations. The total refund was over $8,000. The management company also terminated their contract with the tow vendor Colleen had been using and opened a competitive bid process for a new vendor. The restraining order hearing was straightforward. I brought the doorbell video, the text messages, the voicemails, and a written timeline of every incident. Colleen did not show up. The judge granted the temporary restraining order and scheduled a follow-up hearing in 30 days. Colleen did not show up to that hearing either. The judge made the restraining order permanent. Colleen was barred from contacting me, coming within 100 feet of my property, or initiating any enforcement actions against me. The order was filed with the county clerk and added to the HOA's official records. The board held one final meeting to vote on a new rules enforcement policy. The new policy required written notice delivered by certified mail for all alleged violations, a 10-day cure period before any enforcement action, board approval for all fines, liens, or towing actions, a formal appeal process with neutral third-party review, annual audits of all enforcement actions, mandatory training for all committee chairs on privacy, due process, and legal liability. The policy passed unanimously. The board also voted to disband the Rules Enforcement Committee and transfer all enforcement authority to the management company. Colleen resigned from the board 2 weeks later. She sold her house and moved out of Fairview Landing 3 months after that. I stayed. I kept the tire clamp on my kitchen counter as a reminder. I kept the binder of evidence in a drawer in case I ever needed it again. And I kept the doorbell camera pointed at the driveway, just in case. But nothing happened. No more notices, no more cones, no more midnight visits, no more texts. The management company handled enforcement actions professionally and fairly. Disputes were resolved quickly. Residents stopped living in fear of random fines and towing threats. Greg stopped me one afternoon while I was unloading tools from the van. "You did a good thing," he said. "A lot of people were too scared to push back. You changed this place." "I just wanted to park my van," I said. He laughed. "Well, you did that. And a lot more." The story could end there. But it does not. Because 2 months after Colleen moved out, I got a letter in the mail. It was from an attorney representing Colleen. The letter claimed I had defamed her, harassed her, and caused her emotional distress. It demanded a written apology and $10,000 in damages. I handed the letter to the HOA attorney. He read it and smiled. This is what we call a slap suit, he said. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is trying to intimidate you into silence. The good news is, it is not going to work. We are going to file a motion to dismiss, and we are going to ask the court to award you attorney's fees under the anti-slap statute. He did. The court dismissed the suit and ordered Colleen to pay my attorney's fees. The total was $4,200. Colleen did not pay. The attorney filed a collections action. Colleen ignored it. A lien was placed on her new property. The final twist came 6 months later. I got a call from a resident who still lived in Fairview Landing. She told me that Colleen had been hired as a property manager for another HOA in a neighboring town. Within 3 months, that HOA was facing 2 lawsuits for wrongful towing and harassment. Colleen was fired. The lawsuits were settled quietly. I never heard from her again. But I did hear from other residents, people from other HOAs who had heard about what happened, people who were dealing with their own Colleens, people who wanted advice, evidence templates, legal referrals. I helped when I could. I shared the binder template. I explained the appeals process. I connected people with attorneys who understood HOA law. Because the truth is, Fairview Landing was not unique. Predatory HOA enforcement happens everywhere. And most people do not fight back because they do not know how, or they are scared, or they think they are alone. But you are not alone, and you do not have to accept it. You can document. You can appeal. You can demand accountability. You can win. And if you do it right, you can make sure the next person does not have to fight the same fight. I still live in Fairview Landing. I still drive the same work van. I still park it in the same driveway. And every time I pull in, I remember the night Colleen waved at my doorbell camera, smiling like she had already won. She had not. And that made all the difference. The policy changes held, the management company proved competent, the board stabilized, new residents moved in, old residents relaxed. The neighborhood became what it was supposed to be, a place where people lived, not a place where people were hunted. I kept the tire clamp on the counter for another year. Then I donated it to a local mechanic who used it for training his apprentices. But I kept the binder. And I kept the doorbell footage. And I kept every email, every text, every receipt, every screenshot. Because you never know when you might need proof that you were right. And because sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to make sure everyone can see exactly what they did. A few months later, the HOA held elections. The old board president stepped down. A new slate of candidates ran on a platform of transparency, accountability, and resident rights. They won in a landslide. One of the first things they did was commission an independent audit of all HOA finances and enforcement actions going back 5 years. The audit uncovered more problems: irregular payments to vendors, undocumented expenses, missing records. The auditor recommended a forensic review. The board voted to proceed. The forensic review found evidence of kickbacks between Colleen and the tow vendor. The vendor had been paying Colleen a $50 referral fee for every tow she authorized. The board referred the findings to the state attorney general. The AG opened an investigation. The tow vendor lost their license. Colleen was charged with accepting illegal kickbacks and fraud. She pled guilty to a reduced charge and was sentenced to probation and restitution. The HOA used the restitution money to fund a legal defense fund for residents facing future enforcement disputes. They also hired a new management company with a strong reputation for compliance and resident advocacy. Fairview Landing became a case study. Local news covered the story. HOA reform groups cited it as an example of what residents can accomplish when they organize and fight back. The state legislature introduced a bill to strengthen HOA oversight and increase penalties for abusive enforcement practices. The bill passed. I got asked to speak at a few community meetings. I talked about documentation. I talked about knowing your rights. I talked about the importance of reading your HOA's governing documents and understanding the enforcement procedures. I talked about the difference between compliance and harassment. And I talked about the tire clamp. I always talked about the tire clamp. Because that was the moment I realized that Colleen was not just enforcing rules. She was waging war. And once I understood that, I knew I had to fight back with everything I had. People asked me if I regretted it, if I wished I had just paid the fine and moved on. If I thought it was worth the stress and the time and the money. I told them the truth. It was not about the fine. It was not about the van. It was not even about Colleen. It was about the principle. It was about refusing to let fear and intimidation define how I lived in my own home. And it was about making sure the next person did not have to go through what I went through. Because that is what bullies count on. They count on you being too tired, too scared, too broke, too isolated to fight back. They count on you accepting their version of reality. They count on you believing that you are powerless. But you are not powerless. You have rights. You have evidence. You have witnesses. You have the law. And if you use them, you can win. The restraining order stayed in effect. Colleen did not appeal. She did not contact me. She did not return to Fairview Landing. As far as I know, she moved to another state and started over. I hope she learned something. I doubt she did. But I know the residents of Fairview Landing learned something. They learned that HOAs only have the power you give them. They learned that enforcement requires due process. They learned that abuse can be stopped. And they learned that one person, with a doorbell camera and a 3-ring binder, can take down a system that seemed untouchable. I still have the binder. I still have the footage. I still have the receipts. I keep them in a drawer in my kitchen, next to the spot where the tire clamp used to sit. And every time I open that drawer, I remember the night Colleen waved at my camera. I remember her smile. I remember thinking, she has no idea what is coming. And I smile. Because I won. The HOA still exists. It still has rules. It still enforces them. But now it does so fairly, transparently, and with respect for residents' rights. Disputes are resolved quickly. Appeals are heard. Mistakes are corrected. The fear is gone. And that is what I fought for. Not revenge, not vindication, just the right to live in peace, park my van in my driveway, and go to work without wondering if I would come home to a tow truck. It sounds simple. It should be simple. But for a while it was not. And if I had not fought back, it never would have been. So if you are reading this, and you are dealing with your own Colleen, and you are wondering if it is worth it, it is. Document everything. Know your rights. Find your allies. Build your case. And do not back down. Because bullies only win when you let them. And I did not let her. I hope your night is calm.